Hello, worldly crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games, and today we are going to talk about one of the lesser known but nonetheless interesting features in the input handler for GameMaker, and that is going to be chord groups. So input, if you're not familiar with it, it is extremely interesting. It is a universal input handler for GameMaker. You can use it to do some exciting things like handling keyboard, mouse, gamepad input, rebinding keys, that sort of thing. I've made a whole series of videos on setting it up, which you can go and have a look at. So chord groups. The concept of a chord comes from like music. If you're playing a piano and you want to like hit multiple keys on the piano at the same time, you know, with different fingers. So the concept of a chord carries over into games. The analog would be if you need to hit multiple buttons on the gamepad or on the keyboard at the same time to make something happen. That would be considered a chord. Examples in non-game context would be something like Control S to save. You need to hit the Control button and also the S button to make something happen. Alt F4, Alt Enter. There's all kinds of examples in software. In games, you might use it if you have something like a platformer game and you need to do some context-sensitive actions like hitting, I don't know, maybe if you hit the jump button and also one of the directional inputs at the same time, you'll do like a sideways dodge instead of a jump, something like that. So setting these up in GameMaker is quite easy, and I'm going to use a bit of an unrealistic example for this because I don't have very good hand-eye coordination, and I don't play a lot of games where you have to actually hit more than one buttons at once to do things. So, if I go into my feather verb definitions, I've got a few that are for things like up, down, left, right. That's fine. Run, action, cast. So in this little demo program, if you hit the tab key, that's going to be the key to cast a spell, right? You hit the tab key and you do the spell casting animation. And I'm going to, can I get rid of, actually, I'm not going to get rid of the gamepad section because I'm not going to demo it here, but if you do want to take this example code and plug in your own gamepad, it should still work. I'm going to comment out the verb for casting a spell. Alright, let me increase this font size again. So I'm going to start by commenting out the existing cast verb, and let's see, I'm gonna comment that out on both of those input sets. And I'm also going to set the action button to, instead of space, enter, and that's just so that these two keys are on opposite sides of my keyboard, so that when I, like, show my keyboard, they're a little farther apart. There is exactly one function pertaining to chords in GameMaker in input, and that is input chord create, at least as far as I'm aware. And this is nice because chords basically will create verbs of their own, but they'll be like compound verbs built out of other existing verbs instead of being tied to a key like this. So if I were to say input chord create, we can create ourselves a chord slash verb, and I'm going to name it cast so that it works as it did before. By the way, if you try to run your game and you try to use a verb that hasn't been defined in here, you will just get an error because input's going to be like, I don't know what to do with this, so don't do that. If you say input chord create, there's going to be the name of the chord slash verb that you want to define. There's going to be the max time between presses, and I'll get back to that later. For now, let's just say 10. There's going to be verb 1, which you want your chord to be composed of. I'm just going to say run. Verb 2, action. You could continue going. You could have more compound verbs if you like. I'm not sure if there's really a case to be made for more than 2 or maybe 3, because after that, it's like, how many fingers do you have? I guess if you're making like a rhythm game, you might want bigger verbs. But anyway, I'm going to run the game now, and we are going to run around. I can hit the run button to run. I can hit the enter button for action in front of an NPC to talk to them. And now, if I were to... Did I configure something wrong? It was working a minute ago in my test project. Anyway, let's set that to some big number, and I'll come back to that. So if I were to run around with this configured correctly anyway, and if I were to hit the enter key, we would go into the spell casting animation. And it would also work in reverse, so if I hit the enter key and then hit the run button, we'll go into the casting animation. I don't know if there is a way. It might be an interesting, if niche, feature request to input to have it be like direction dependent so that you have to hit one button before the other. But anyway, let's go back to this max time between presses. So if you take longer than, in this case, 10,000 seconds, which is functionally infinite, that's like 3 hours. If you take longer than this to hit both buttons, then the chord won't be triggered. They'll just be treated as like their individual inputs. This value here, by default, it will be in seconds, so you can define the delay in seconds. But if you have configured the input timer milliseconds configuration setting to be true, then this timer duration will be in milliseconds instead of in seconds, and this here would be 10,000 milliseconds, so that would be a 10-second delay between max delay between verb presses, which is still a lot, but it's like it's a little more reasonable than like 3 hours, right? So let me go and do this again, and I'm gonna hit the run button and run around for a little bit. That was probably more than a second, right? And if I hit the enter key now, then we won't go into the casting animation. But if I do it quickly, so 1, 2, then we will, because the timer hasn't, like, the delay hasn't expired between the chord presses. Then again, it works in reverse. So if you hit the enter key quickly, okay, talking to NPCs. If you hit the enter key and then go into the hit the run button, it'll do the casting animation. But if you hit the enter key and then like take your time, it won't. It will do the running animation though. So if your game is very like reflex dependent, like maybe you're actually making like an action platformer or something, maybe a shorter delay of 250 milliseconds, a quarter of a second would be preferable, so that you really have to hit both buttons basically at the same time, within a quarter of a second of each other. If you're into like accessibility options, you might consider making this a longer amount of time. Let's see, can you actually like redefine a chord at runtime to have a longer delay after it's already been defined? I didn't actually try this, but I assume that you can. Let's go from a quarter of a second to 2 seconds. And I'm just gonna say like in the player's step or something like that. If keyboard check VK like F1 or something, I don't think is bound to any input right now. We'll redefine the chord to have a longer delay. So right now, all right, you do have to hit them quickly, like that, quarter of a second. And if I hit F1. You actually don't like that. Interesting. This is basically what happens if you try to, like, define a verb twice. This is a very similar error. I don't think there are any functions in input currently for redefining a chord. And I might request that, so that you could have like an accessibility setting. You could easily set an accessibility setting for like longer input chord, longer input like delay forgiveness in a game. Hey. All right, so that's just a little shower thought from me. It's really not something that you really see very often in games outside of like action platformers, that kind of thing. Although you never know. Maybe someone's making a fighting game. You want to have like a forward attack, a side attack, a back attack, that sort of thing. I could see them being used there. I'm not planning on making use of these in Wizarducks or any of the other projects I'm working on. At least not for the time being. Anyway, I'm going to end this off here. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. As usual, link to where you can find input will be down in the description of the video. I like to post videos on weird stuff you can do in GameMaker, so if any of this appeals to you, feel free to subscribe. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. I hope you all found this useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Squarecrow, Spy Games, Manta Ray, Ganymede Ghosts, GameMaker, Edward Holt, and DJ Gibbles for supporting these videos. If you'd like to join their ranks, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.